let's talk about intervals. So an interval is the space between two notes. Here's an interval. Here's one. Or this. Or this. Space between two notes. The reason to learn intervals systematically, there's two really big reasons. The first one is so that our ear can recognize them. So that in taking each of these distances and giving it a name, and then recognizing it by name when it happens over and over and over and over again, our ear gets familiar with those sounds in an embodied way, where when we hear them, we know how to represent them on our instrument. The second reason is because naming intervals is how we name chords. So when somebody says that's a major 7 chord, that name tells us that it's a chord that contains a major 3rd, a major 7th, and a perfect 5th. And if you don't know how to find those intervals and how to hear those intervals, the chord symbol is meaningless to you. So you won't be able to read chord symbols or talk with other musicians about chords. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the intervals, each of the distances between two notes that happens within the space of an octave to start. Eventually, you'll want to be able to recognize the sound of much bigger intervals than that. But for now, we're going to stick with an octave. And we're going to practice each interval that we talk about going up, so, and going down. And we're going to take each of those and practice them around the circle of fifths so that we make sure and hit every one, and so that our ear is hearing that interval over and over and over and over again out of context. So it's hearing that interval happen over and over in a bunch of different contexts, not embedded within just one scale. That's going to get our ear really familiar with each of these intervals. The first two intervals we're going to talk about are the ones that happen in the circle of fifths itself. And that's the interval of a fifth from C down to F, or from C up to G. These are called perfect fifths. Or if you take each of those intervals and invert them, flip them over, you get perfect fourths. So C up to F, or down to G. These are perfect fourths, perfect fifths, and perfect fourths. And you'll notice that both of these intervals have this kind of stable, open sound to them. And right now, if you were to hear either of these intervals in a song, I think it's likely that it would be hard for you to tell the difference between the two of them. You might just recognize, oh, I think that's a fourth or a fifth. It has that stable, open sound. And if you can already do that, that's awesome. If you can't already do that, don't worry about it. That's what we're doing here. We're learning to hear these. We're learning to recognize these. But yeah, if you can, that's great. Your ear is on its way to being sharp enough to tell the difference between these two really similar intervals. Okay? So what we're going to do to sharpen our ear more, regardless of where you're at right now, is we're going to take each interval and play it all the way around the circle of fifths, descending and ascending. Okay? So let's take a fifth. So a fifth descending from C and ascending from C. Then we go to the next note in the circle, an F, and we play a fifth descending and ascending. Next, a B flat, play descending and ascending. E flat. And I'll go all the way around the circle this way. back. So we're getting our ear really familiar with hearing that. So this isn't something to just do one time. This is something to start making a part of your practice routine. Choose one interval every day, or you could choose that interval plus it flipped over. There's a lot of ways to do this, but choose something that's manageable for you and do it every day so your ear's getting a chance to hear this. Then start a journal and write each interval that we learn as a descending version and as an ascending version. So what I've written here is descending, down arrow is what I use for shorthand. Down arrow fifth, up arrow fifth, down fourth, and up fourth. And then I'm gonna start keeping a running list of songs I know that use those intervals in the melody. So I start associating my ear with specific songs that I love, because that's gonna make it stick a lot faster than if these intervals are just completely disassociated from actual music that we love. So I'm gonna go through each interval, descending and ascending, and name the song that first came to mind for me that used that interval, okay? So descending fifth. The first song that came to mind for me is the Back to the Future theme, which goes... Descending fifth. So I wrote Back to the Future. Ascending fifth. The first song that came to mind for me with this was the Jurassic Park theme, which has 2 ascending fifths right at the beginning. Great ascending fifth melody, right? Then I did descending and ascending fourths. So this is a descending fourth, and the first song that came to mind for me is the song in the closing credits of the first Lord of the Rings movie. I remember it's called Into the West. I don't remember who it's by, but she sings, "Lay down your sweet and weary head. White shores are calling." So I wrote that down, Into the West. Okay. Ascending fourth. So 2 songs immediately came to mind for me with an ascending fourth. They're both from Star Wars. The first one is the opening title. That's an ascending fourth. And then there's an ascending fifth. The second one is the Jedi theme. So that melody uses a lot of ascending fourths. Okay? So that's the process. We're going to do that with every interval. We're going to practice it around the circle, descending and ascending. And with every other interval, the interval that we use isn't going to be the interval that's actually written on the circle of fifths, right? And this one, it's easy because you're actually seeing those notes. But every other interval we use isn't going to be that way. So we'll practice each of them in that way around the circle. And we'll keep a running journal of which songs do I recognize that use that motion. Okay? So I'm going to stop this video, start a new video, and we'll go over in the next video the 2 most common intervals that we use to name chords, and that's major and minor thirds and major and minor sevenths.